Hi, everybody. Uh, this is another Thursday night, in case anybody is counting. They're off a little bit, which can happen all the time, I suppose. Uh, Thank you for some of you have sent in a few questions, and I appreciate that very much. It gives me an idea of where your thinking process is so that I can try and be helpful to you as opposed to uh, only engaging in things that might be interesting to me. Um, and this one is from Donna Voldness, and there's a number of questions in the overall uh, question structure here. So, Sid, would you talk about why the continued practice of opening the hands is so important? I think at the last seminar, you referred to how there were so many areas where you could sense and feel spinning circles of energy when turning on the hands. For example, between the hands, around the fingers and hands, in front of the brow, heart center. I also noted several other seemingly unusual areas of the body. Well, let's start there. Um, the reason why I I talk about the opening of the hands being very important uh, is that it does open the centers of the hands. Now, look, each and every center is linked up to each and every other center. So, for example, the root center is ultimately engaged with the crown center, but every other center as well. So that within that root center, there are 7 levels of expression. They are not like a row of beads. It's more like one center may be able to function very well emotionally on the in the emotional body. Another may be able to function all the way through to the mental body, and they're working together to try and find a cohesive balance within, let's say, one could say, the personality. The personality base is structurally involved with the root, the gonad center, and the solar plexus. That's the initial structure. In all 3 centers are links with the heart center, the throat center, the brow, the crown. Uh, some call it a center behind the neck. There are other centers off the dowager's hump. There are other centers uh, all around the body, which doesn't really, not very important in this particular question. But each and every one of these centers are involved with the structural organization of a personality. Energy comes into the system, is around you when you're a little child in the womb, and you are slowly beginning to use those centers to anticipate or figure out what's going on around you. Now we come into this world. Prior to that, we're sensing. We hear tones. We have responses, emotional responses from the mother and anyone else who's close by. Uh, Primarily, energetic responses are very important to the to how the individual begins its journey and then continues to add on pieces to the personality journey. And when you get out into the open, into this world, then your focus begins to be very physically, emotionally reflexive in response From time to time, an idea germinates in the mind relative to what's going on. So you're cultivating these three centers, linking up through the nervous system, information coming in, information going out. And the brain is trying to make sense of that. And we call that the brain, and we often call it the mind because it's up here. Emotion, and in some schools, some ways of thinking, emotion is never considered. It's all a part of the brain or the mind and how it responds and engages, this kind of thing. I split it slightly differently simply because that's the way I see it, but that is not necessarily how you have to see it. You can try and figure it out from your own perspective. So when you open a center like root, gonad, solar plexus, then energies can move close to the body, off the body, into the body, off the body. In other words, emotional, physical, and one could say, because this is a real minefield of how one has to think of things, then in your mind you figure stuff out, or you read a bunch of stuff and you memorize it and you call it true. When you're opening the hands and you start perceiving the hands as more open, meaning you perceive something around it, and that's an energy field that has conscious awareness within your personality because you're aware of it. Simple. You become aware of something occurring in the hands. If you don't, then of course you go back to your bias and say, that's not possible, blah, 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 blah. Or if you're around a bunch of people and you're doing this kind of thing and they're not, then they will think it's kind of weird that you're actually perceiving energy because, well, that's not rational. It doesn't make any sense. Your perception, your experience in your personality counts a lot. Then what you do is you engage with the environment around you to see if it's real or not. In fact, it may be real, but you may consider it, oh, that can't be because others don't notice that. Or you might be in the other way of thinking. If something is happening to you, then it must be happening to everybody else. I'm afraid that that's how I thought things were in the beginning, and I was wrong. It wasn't always happening to other people. People talked as if sometimes things were happening, and they weren't. They were actually creating an awareness. Don does ask this question by a relationship with belief versus a relationship with what was actually what could be perceived by them. And it gets a little mixed up. But mixed up as it is, it's just part of the development. So let it be mixed up, but then later, if you begin to actually perceive something and you begin to say, my goodness, I can actually perceive that. Many times you will, if you're brought up to abide by what other people tell you is true, then you will question what you experience. Okay, that's okay. Except that you may be experiencing something and not want to because it's not what other people are. And in fact, all it means is you're still developing your personality to a point where you can allow yourself to trust what you're perceiving because it's engaging with the whole of the system and trying to help it to broaden out its capacity to realize that there is something going on because you're experiencing it. Okay, all right. In the opening of the hands, it's tried and true from thousands of years, for thousands of years. The opening of the hands, because you move them all the time and you're using them more often, probably, with one exception, other than your feet. You're stepping on them all the time. And so they can be opened in a similar way. However, initially it can cause a few difficulties. Your ankles will be a little bit vibrating all the time. Your feet will be a little hot all the time. And your defenses may be a little stronger because it will help the root center to broaden out. And you have to learn how to soften that down, because your defensive engagement physically is a matter of relating to a person's survival. So you learn how to do this ever so slowly. So you're attempting to be gentler as opposed to present with a force. Well, in some parts of our world and some kinds of ways of operating, that is intimidating. Therefore, you're extra special because you can do that. In fact, ultimately, at a higher level, you literally blend that intensity that you get through that root center, because the root center itself is moving into other levels within it. So it's softening. But soft does not mean not able. Soft means gentler, and you perceive more, broader than what you're normally used to. Harsher means you're still locked into that power base of being important because you can do something. Well, this is part of the treasure of being on these planes. And we haven't moved into a deeper understanding of that yet. It'll take some time for us to do so, because our links in a cultural manner they're based on getting your way. And if you get your way, somehow you're more valid than other people. This is something we have to learn more about. You can engage with that flow. Don't have to get your way. It's not relevant. It may be hurtful to another. Sometimes it might be helpful to them. Sometimes it might be hurtful to you. Sometimes it might be helpful to you. So the hands have all of the centers in them, no matter how minor these things are. They can link up to a higher state. I'm still on the first question. And that higher state can interject movement physically, emotionally, still physically emotional, and mentally. And the mind plane can interact with the hands and move them. And you will see you're not in charge of those hands. They move them to a position or place within you. They were often called mudras in the Hindu and the Buddhist and the Taoist orientations, in the old traditional ways. And these mudras were not memorized. There was nothing to do with memorization. It was because the hands were linked with a higher state. The higher state would come in, place a hand in a particular position, hold it there, so that the energy from that hand would help to open a heart center, help to open the root center more in a different way, in the solar plexus, in the gonad center more, to balance off your will, that self-will for the personalizations of respect or bias. to soften it down, and to link up with the heart center or the brow center. Marlene, excuse me, would you get that, please? I'm concerned that someone may not be hearing, or it might be just an advertisement. So I apologize for that. Okay, advertisement, I guess. So thank you, Marlene. When you're dealing with these things, then it would help a little bit that you had a broader idea in your mind, because we're already biased tremendously in so-called spiritual the world. Anything above the diaphragm is good. Anything below it is bad. That's one bias, which is not really as real as we believe. If your heart center is open, you're extra special, better than only your brow or your throat, or the brow. That means just you're smart, and that's not really spiritual. All of these are just biased definitions. They have nothing to do with reality. Could it be true? Yes, of course it could. But the reality of things is everything is in a process of preparation. All of this energy within us creates our physical form, our emotional dispositions, our way of seeing things. They're all in process, preparation for things that may be helpful as we grow and we begin to learn and understand deeper. And it becomes different then. It gets to the point where you begin to understand that there is preparation going on, as opposed to things having to be exactly this way versus that way, another way versus this way. Shouldn't it be this instead of that? Because I don't like doing that. This is normal in our world because our relationship with training, well, we have to put ourselves out. And if we're going to train at all or do something that might be helpful to us, we're going to do it relative to what we think how things should be done. Because I once read something, or somebody told me one time, or whatever. All of these things are part of the anatomy of engaging with life on these planes. All of it. The old sages knew this, and they would turn these things on. And they knew that they would get help turning that brow on. They would get help engaging with a root center or a throat center. The hands would move on their own. It would be a movement away from that center. And the next instant, something different would occur. Pressure forward. You're way out there. Up there about 9 feet in the air is relative to the gonad center. Well, nobody understands that. Back in through, behind the head, back about 6 feet, it's relative to the throat and back of the chest, heart center. These things are not relevant because you'll memorize them and do it to get that. If you're trying to really engage, if these hands can be opened at different levels, then that level will help you to prepare for an engagement with that level relative to a movement towards perception of these levels for the purpose of preparing a system, which is part of another question, part of the personality's ability to stretch. Personality is really interesting. It's an energy form. It is porous. Wind blows through it because we don't see it. We look at it. We try to see and understand something in our past, in our future, perhaps, but in our past. If you can see the future, boy, that makes you extra special, but you still have that personality that's trying to do that. You look at the past and you look at the present, each second, each moment, and each engagement and understanding that you come up with has a bias to it. There's no doubt. But it's a movement towards understanding a little bit broader than you could have before. It's not there to be beaten up. Oh, I did that in the past. This is an awful one. It's not like that. That is a timeline. Age 11. If you had an event that was not comfortable at that time, that has an impact on you right now. Emotionally, yes. Physically, yes. It affects your will and how you need to protect yourself. Absolutely. Can you learn how to watch that happening? Yes, you can. But oh my goodness, it's not, you don't do it 24 hours a day. Your personality can't handle that because your bias, normal for everybody, you will have an edge on it. This is what I should be doing, not that. Oh my God, they were terrible to me, blah, blah, blah. It's softening down that timeline in that moment at age 11, 15, 18, whatever, 12, 6, I don't care. So that you can look at it and use these things to think back using the brain. It usually will be an emotional brain, but it doesn't matter because it's all part of us. Think back and to consider a high state. That's how I do it. So you find your own way if you don't like mine. And look back and want to soften that down because it affects you now. If you were treated harshly back then, you will treat others harshly now. It's like a boom, bending and a pushing and a self-protecting. Well, all that self-protection pushes other people away. Now, why would that be a bad thing? One could say, or one could say that would not be a good thing. You have to have a little sense of humor in this thing. When you look at it, if you push people away, then you can always blame them for not being close. That means you're doing the same thing as what happened to you, what did happen to you, if under that particular set of circumstances, if it was harsh. This is complicated. Yet, each year, each second, each month, each moment, there is an instance, a core, like a little, oh, I hate to say this out loud, like a little boil with a center that hurt and therefore caused a reflex response to occur in a tonal manner in our system, which still exists, by the way. But if it can be softened down a little bit, in the old days they used to call that healing. And you could attempt to do that. I often suggested using a piece of brown paper and trying to, on the floor, or the table, I don't care where it is, and in your life, write down some places where you think that you were treated badly and you think you were treated well, and I mean well, reasonably well, if you were treated too badly, you'll have a hard time remembering those other times because the other ones will be front and center for you. Then using your hands, you can literally try to be, when they're on, relaxed, and just ask for healing and transmutation and healing for those times, those timelines that still exist within you. And that's to be gently balanced, healed in a gentle, balanced, and appropriate a manner as possible. Always appropriate a manner as possible. Meaning this, can't quite handle that not being there because it's part of my personality staging. And it's being part, and it's not negative, it's just being part of it and how I engage with life. So I can't handle it if it goes away too quickly, but I can have it go away a little at a time. And that would be most helpful to me. But be patient with me because I really want that to soften down and find a middle ground in it. It doesn't say all you're thinking of back there was wrong. No, it may be real, but finding a place where that emotional construct is balanced and softer, and knowing you can't do very much about it now other than be respectful of the timeline and realize maybe the difficulty was that whoever perpetrated that was under duress of some kind, unknown to you, and certainly you'll never probably know unless you guess, and guesses are biases as well. No negation in that. It's asking for help. A higher state will see that clearly and know also how able you are to handle not having it there as strongly as currently you need it to be. That's a big question, Donna, and a huge answer. But when you do all of these things, what you're every time you turn your hands on, you're deepening the capacity that your hands and your personality will allow them to work in relationship to a higher state versus how you think it should occur. That means at some point, the higher state will take over the hands. That may spook you out. For some of you, you've been involved with massage work and various things of that nature, and other things as well, doing sometimes martial art practices. And you've noticed from time to time where all of a sudden you take a different stance in a different form, or your hands, when you're working with people, will move to another area and you can't figure out why, because that's not what you learned. In those moments, another state has taken that hand and placed it there for a reason. Some of the originating ideas of these courses that some of you have taken that enables you to be functionally able to help people with certain dilemmas, physically or emotionally. The originator has experienced some of this themselves. Polarity, for example. The originator definitely experienced these things. I happen to have met some people who knew that individual quite well, and that is what they actually tried to get other individuals to do. But it's very difficult to get past the personality's version or visioning of memory. And memory is a helper in a lot of ways. Not so much in some ways, because sometimes the bias is very strong, even in memory. Shockingly so, actually. Many scientific experiments have shown. Okay, that's at least a little bit of a beginning to give you an idea about what this question was. Why is it so important? Because ultimately, if your hands begin to move, your whole system will be more effectively helped by a higher state, because already an aspect of any one of the centers are already starting to be on based on the centers opening in the hands. It's a key thing. It is well known amongst those who really have that kind of awareness, not so much by people who are hooked by definition about what should be and what shouldn't be, and I don't care what it is. But even those hooks by others, they're hooked on what they believe has to be because of ideas that were given to him. Even then, it's a beginning for them, and they may see that as an end, but it's a beginning, and not to be negated. Later, a broader understanding begins to take place because they're being helped by other states. If that makes any sense at all. I think the last seminar you referred to how there were so many areas where you could sense or feel spinning circles of energy when turning on the hands, for example, between the hands, around the fingers, in front of the brow, the heart center. And you also noted several other seemingly unusual areas of the body. And I think we talked a little bit about that because it begins to turn on the hands, you begin slightly to be more sensitive. And as you continue on, if it turns on any of the centers that are linked up to the top of the head or linking towards the top of the head, it will continue to do so. You have to take this reasonably slow. Be okay. Notice what's going on. Back away. Keep quiet about it. Talk to someone who already knows about this stuff and is not so much involved with the competition. There's no competition in this. The other day I was talking to a gentleman and his throat center was quite strong, made me cough. It was open in a place where I wasn't. I find that wonderfully enhancing. Not the coughing, but the opening part. This is of great value. We all have different ways of engaging with life. We spend far too much time in competing with others about how important you are because of how able you think you are. That is an honest thing I just said. If you can back away from that, then you don't have to push yourselves to be recognized. Anyone who is really able will recognize that you can do that. Why tell them? They already know. Otherwise, you're just telling somebody that doesn't. Unless you're a teacher, then you get to be helpful best you can, and you get to learn how to teach over the first 100 or 200 years that you're involved with it. I wish you well with that one. Okay. Do we feel the movement of the energy occurring because we are becoming more physically aware of the vital and magnetic subtle bodies? You see, I know this is theosophical, vital and magnetic subtle bodies. Yeah, sure. Go ahead. There's an intermix of energy from every system that exists. We feel very comforted by naming systems. It makes us talk like, well, I entered the vital. I'm very able to perceive that. I've now entered into the soul structure with my awareness, into the monadic structure, into the blah, 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 blah. Whether it's true or not doesn't really matter. If it is true, then you won't be talking about it. because it's not realistic to do so. Virtually hardly anyone will know what you're talking about. And your communication will be, in all honesty, related to you. So back away, attempt to find out these things related to your own experience. If you have small groups of people, talk with each other about what you think a version of perception might be in an area. For example, often people talk about the mental body. If you move into the mental body, your emotional, physical, mental system goes silent. You'll be in and out of it because that's how things work. And your mind will sometimes be quiet. So quiet, you'll think you have some disease that you need to check up in. You will be disturbed about that. And you will have nothing to worry about. But your disturbance is there because it's not something you're used to. Anything that is different will cause you to wonder what's going on or why. Because you'll be protecting how you were before. If you have a stream of huge amount of information that you know, not experientially, but you know, then you'll talk about it relative to the idea that that's where you are. In fact, that may not be true. It's a terrible thing to say. I mean, no disparaging. It's not a disparaging remark. It's more like, holy smokes. Do I really want to be in a mind plane rather than an emotional mind plane attached to my physical form and my brain? If I'm in a mind plane, I will see everything that I do based on where I am in that moment, so that it won't hurt me so much, but I cannot miss it. Because I'll be looking at me from a distance as well as within. You see, when I say from a distance, it really means within, knowing and seeing within, as if you were watching from a distance. It's that sensation that you'll have. And then watch to see if your biased responses, your defenses, jump in and say, you're bad and good, I shouldn't be like this, I shouldn't. The mind plane does not do that. The mental plane does. And what do I mean by that? It means the emotional, physical engagement with the brain that has information in it and has a view of how things should be, is that sort of astral mental plane. A capable individual who's studied and done a tremendous amount of work has a strong astral mental plane. The mind plane does not protect that form. The form itself, the defensive, emotional, defensive mental form, protects itself, its own biases. And it does that because it knows it better, because that's where its view of itself sits. There's nothing wrong with that. That's absolutely a part of development. There's no negation in that one. When the mind plane comes in, There is a quiet within the mind, and you soon start to know that if you have hurts inside, you may even respond emotionally to that, but you will watch yourself responding it. You won't miss it. It's there. Now, the dilemma with that mind plane is you begin to notice how others strategize around you. And this is very disturbing. It's disturbing because you don't realize that reflexively you strategize as well. And it's based on culpability. How able a person are you? And it's based on physical, emotional, intellectual orientation. The mind plane is not. The mind plane is based on perception. And in our process of thinking, most often we try to figure stuff out. In the mind plane, there is expression of perceiving something that is not figured out, but it's locked in and you're aware of it, and then you're on to something else. It has nothing to do with validating it at all. I'm not really interested because you can never free plane. It's a different orientation than what we are suggestively involved with currently as a member of our species, the species that we relate to. So remember, every time you grow an inch, you affect the species in at least a couple of ways. Number one, it helps the species to broaden out just a little bit. And also, it sends the species into a reflex response that will validate, for example, if you were meditating all the time or often and still able to function as you were meditating, then what would begin to occur is that you may begin to perceive more and more and more. And the species itself, energetically speaking, it protects how it is now in a kind of a way. You might forget to meditate for a few days, a month, a week or so. Not your fault. You've made a shift. You've grown a little bit. You need time to be okay with the growing. And the species will help you at that time. So if you remember, I said, don't be hard on anyone that decides that they can't meditate because of whatever reason. They'll come back in their own way, in their own time. No offense there, it's just how it tends to work out, apparently. Okay, I'm not sure whether I did. Do we feel the movement of the energy occurring because we are becoming more physically aware of the vital and magnetic subtle bodies? I think you can say you're becoming more aware. Do we create these sensations? And if we create them, do we create awareness of what's there if we only realize the movement that is there? If we only perceive the movement that's there, realize it, or possibly all around us. Not sure what she's getting at, but do we create these sensations? There is a lot of information or material written about hypnosis. You can hypnotize yourself into doing all kinds of things. One thing for sure, you can hypnotize yourself into remaining the same because it makes you feel good. Now, if you can handle that one, and you're maintaining every single day of your life how you were yesterday, is an act of self protection. Think of it in a positive way. If you adjust or something occurs that shifts that, and you begin to proceed beyond that, allow yourself to be curious and watch you as if from a distance. You're not from a distance, but as if from a distance. Your mind can do that. Your brain can do that, rather. Your mind eventually will show you how to do that, but you can do it with your brain, watching you do whatever you do. Don't do that too long, because your defensive biases will come on. It'll come on to stop you from doing that, and it will come on when you are able to do that, and uh, you will start blaming yourself for being such a terrible person, and it's not real. You're not terrible. You're living in a structure called personality. It is there because you habitually have constructed it. And you need to do that in your biased way, because it makes you feel as if you're in charge, control, or just feel, in your version of definition, better, more comfortable being the way you've constructed yourself to be. So there's no um, creation of that, except that you do create it, your personality, and you have from a long time ago. But if you experience something, try to realize that your personality is extremely elastic. It's like a whole bunch of particles on a screen. You're looking at a screen, you're seeing an image, but it's just a bunch of particles that come together. And unless you're really closely looking, your eyes are a lot better than mine, you can't see the particles. And I think they call them pixels. So if you had the capacity to see in between the particles, you would notice the pixels because you're seeing the spaces. You would know that because it's real. Now, if someone says, no, you don't understand, that's not possible. Your eyes can't do that. And you say, oh no, my eyes can't do that. So I'm really not seeing those empty spaces in between the particles. Then what you have done is de-elasticized your personality's version or bias, because you're afraid that you might not measure up to someone else's point of view. This is natural in our world. This is how we're trained. And you also have your own point of view. And you can judge everything out there because it's your right to do so. But you'll end up judging yourself too. Or if you don't, it'll be a problem, because you'll always be judging others, and everyone will always be the problem, and never will you allow yourself to shift or change. Fortunately, it won't matter. You will shift and change, because there are small little things that occur every single day that help us to move forward in our engagement with life. And some are a little bigger than others. I prefer the little ones better myself. I don't know about you. What I said there, let's see, is personality is stretchable and shaped. It can be shaped very thin. In other words, made very, very thin to let you watch you as you live. And when you're watching you, try to watch you without judging anything you see. Oh boy, that one's tough, because you're creating the watching with the personality of the judges. So try to soften that down a little bit by talking to it and asking for help for it. Easy, easy, easy. I don't need to judge that hard. You are malleable, flexible, but self-imposing and defensive. It's a system that you have so that you can survive in this world. Without it, it would be a little bit more difficult because you would think that you would be manipulated externally. It can happen. Also, remember, as a child, as a young adult, you were manipulated. You were told how to be, and it helped you formulate a method or a way to be, your version, of course, but the impact of others telling you these things uh, was strong. You couldn't wait for the day when you were the one that told other people what to do. It's natural. It's how we're trained. But also that you could tell yourself what to do. And sometimes that's if the pressure was too strong uh, by others telling you, it's very difficult because you weren't trained to help you tell you what to do. And many of us were trained that way. In this world, I mean, it's big. It's part of the human condition. Understand that, and then you start to realize, my goodness, if it's part of the human condition and everyone is to some degree like that, then that's weird because I always thought I was the only one like that. You could say that and you would be honest with yourself. And slowly, very, very slowly, try to temper that a little bit, soften it down a little bit. Be kinder and more respectful to you, as well as when you do that and you feel that more respect for yourself, you'll begin slowly to have more respect for others. And the degree of difficulty that they have to deal with might be similar to some of the stuff you have to deal with. And you know how hard that is. Go slow with it. Support yourself in a constructive manner to the best of your ability. And I know many of you are attempting to do that. And that is wonderful. So really wonderful. Good for you. That takes courage. Okay. The defensive system is vital in the power focus that our structures have that relate to survival and how one should be in the world. And it holds us from letting our need to be valuable as just something we can look at and see personally ourselves. We need others to tell us that. And this is very difficult for us because others are quite busy trying to do that to themselves. And it's legitimate. Most people are vulnerable, even if they act or express or want you to believe they're not. They're doing that means they are valuable. And I think by now, many adults begin to understand that little bit by little bit. The next question is, of course, relative to the first. Oh boy. Good for you, Donna. When we turn on the hands and do the balancing and grounding at the end of our meditation, and then extend our awareness all around our form, how does that help us, or what does that extended awareness create or do? What it does is it stimulates those chakras. That's why preparation and growing is so profoundly important, but not any more important than living. We go out, we do these exercises, hands are on, bring your hands up. If you're doing it at your shoulders and you're maybe at your ears, at the lower part, you're trying to help the throat center and part of the heart center. And you're rolling these hands upward. Energy is moving from the hands upward to centers beyond your head. And there are many. And they are, when they're open, they link with the personality chakras within and behind or in front or to the sides of your body. Now, I know when you look at pictures, you'll see these things. Well, the difficulty with seeing those things is yes, they are above the head. Yes, they are below the feet. Yes, they are above the ones above the head. The dilemma is that they all take shape in the lens or the form that we are. I'm 5 foot, whatever it is, and I have a system around me. And that system, like those chakras, if one comes on a little stronger than it's used to, it stimulates every other chakra in the area relative to it. For example, if the heart center came on more than you're used to, you would perceive it there. And the energy from that would go to your solar plexus, your root, your gonad center. If you have a little pathway already up to the throat, it will go to the throat. Little pathway up to the back of the head or the front, it'll go there. To the top of the head, it will go there. If it opens more than it could open before. The same is true for every other center. This is the big lens, this form. It's an energetic form. It's energy. It's what it is. If you're on another plane, you may see those chakras in a form as they may come into these planes or not. And you may see that, oh my goodness, all of their centers on, and there's a strong interaction with that throat center. Wonder why that's centered. Wait, isn't it supposed to be this center or that center? Well, it would mean that the throat center is a major chakra in that particular being. And it is sending energy downward to the others and upward to the others, whatever is there. Meaning, and that might be 4, 5, 6, 7 levels inward. But inward is in relationship to the form you are. This just happens to be a physical. We can all see it. Some people purport to see the etheric form or the emotional form or vital form. Which way you look at things, I'm sorry, guys, I have to deal with this Adobe player again. I'll just do it this way. There you go. Sorry, I just said remind me later, and it ignored me. Very complicated. Sorry, guys, I'm still there. I know you can hear me. Great. Thank you very much. So each one of these centers that become a major center in our system doesn't act in a negative way towards the other centers. That's somebody's idea. It moves to help the lower and the upper centers to engage together so that they can function as a unit to a certain level relative to their opening as a major center. For example, I can try and give you this example. I know it's getting close to time, but here's the example. Oh my goodness, maybe I can't. An example would be that if the throat center or the brow center, take one, your choice, begins to be open, broader than the root, gonad, and solar plexus that comes all the way to the top, which is really an amazingly able being, to the top of the head. But if the brow or throat center, let's say the brow, for example, I talked about the throat before, opens past that level, it begins to be operational as a major center and feeds into this structure, this brain inside, the ability to function differently than it could before, and therefore allows a kind of movement into the mind plane so that higher states can move in to help you to know what to do next in relationship to your spiritual growth and in relationship to making the brow center a major center. Therefore, as it opens more, it sends energy down to the root, gonad, solar plexus, perhaps one at a time, depending on the individual, perhaps two, or perhaps three, if the individual can handle it. And it then begins to help that individual to realize that its vulnerability is based on how it's being brought up. But its next level of value doesn't have to do with other people. It has to do with that individual, she or he, living life and getting used to handling increased flow through that brow center into the personality, which was fed originally by the root, gonad, and solar plexus, all the way through to the top of the head. This is occurring virtually all the time. If you meet an individual with a little stronger energy in their heart center or throat or brow, they will not try to go zappo and get you to help you with that center that they think is most important and you should get help there. No, they don't do it that way. They would engage with a high state and perhaps so that they can be aware of it, ask for help for any that is around that may be helped in a way relative to them, not relative to the bias of the individual. It's pretty hard for us to think that that would be possible because we honestly like to think of others and what they should do and what they shouldn't do and why they're doing it that way and why. We have no idea, basically, to be honest. It's all supposition. Until the mind plane starts functioning, we need to understand that all levels of consciousness are valuable in their developmental stages. And when it does start functioning, we need to understand that all levels of development are important in every stage because it's an aspect of developmental process which continues on through lifetime to lifetime to lifetime. I apologize, Donna. I only got through a few of your questions. There's more to come, as well as a couple of others from others. And thank you so much for sending those questions in. And we'll try and cover some the next time. We'll be away for a couple of weeks. Marlene and I are going to take a cottage holiday and do some canoeing, which is one of our favorite things to do. And we'll be back on the 26th. Thank you so much. Take care of yourselves, everybody. And now we're going to meditate.
do you open it?
Try that up. Yeah. And now we'll just begin to do the balancing and grounding on your own. Take your time. Good night, everybody.